Big welcome everyone. So today I'm going to teach you how to make your own autumnal door wreath from materials sourced from your own garden. Now first of all I'm going to use a base, and this is a wire ring base and it's covered in Q-Press. And if you follow us over on YouTube, I've actually a step-by-step tutorial how to make these bases, but it is possible to purchase one from your local flower shop. The other materials you're going to need is a roll of real wire, but a roll of twine will do exactly the same job, a sharp scissors, and then when it comes to the decorations, for decorating it, if that's what you wish, I'll need some florist wire as well. So the first thing is attaching the real wire to your base. And by the way, this could be a straw base as well. And Evergreen Silk Plants up in RD has straw bases for sale. So basically I'm catching the real wire, the edge of it, with my thumb at the back of the frame. And then I'm going to wrap the real wire around the same spot 2 or 3 times, okay? And that just kind of like grips it. So there's no need to tie a knot or stick it into the base or anything. Just wrap around the same spot 3 times. Now do get into the habit of pulling the wire quite tight. And little trick, don't unravel the wire off the roll. Like keep the roll kind of quite tight into it, you know, that way, and you only basically ravel as you need. So in front of me here is selections of foliages from the garden. So I have some of the black pittosporum, I have some of the green pittosporum, you can use the variegated pittosporum. I have little stems of eucalyptus. I have, this is more like a little weed, it's actually dock that has been dried, you know, that way, so it's just dock leaf. And this looks dead, but it's actually bits of dried Q-Press or Leylande or cypress, you'll probably call it. And just for a little bit of colour, it's gorgeous. Again, a little bit of pittosporum here, a bit of green pittosporum. I'm going to add in another bit of eucalyptus. So all you're doing is you're making little bunches in your hand. And there's no particular pattern. So if the next bunch you pick up hasn't got a bit of dock in it, brilliant. And if the next bunch you pick up hasn't got a little bit of eucalyptus in it, brilliant as well. And the length that you cut the pieces of foliage, that will determine how big your door wreath is going to be. So if you'd like it smaller, you can cut your pieces shorter. Now you're keeping all your ends, like keep all your ends near enough the same length. And what you're then going to do, where the real wire is attached, is you're going to place it onto the base on an angle. Now if you wanted to keep the wreath much smaller, you could lessen the angle, or you could keep the material directly flat onto the base. The base, by the way, is a 12-inch base. So I'm going to make this quite big, so we're going to place this on an angle. Now I'm right-handed, so I would use my right hand for wrapping the real wire. So my left hand now is just really supporting the pieces on the base, holding them steady. With my right hand, I'm getting the real wire and I'm going around the end. Can you see the end of the stems there, right? Wrapping it around, pull tight, wrap around a second time, pull tight, and one more for good luck. A third time and pull tight. And that's your first bunch attached. Leave it on the table and now continue to make your second bunch. Now you can see that pittosporum is small, but that's okay. And there we have a bit of black pittosporum. And there we have a little bit of eucalyptus, a little bit of dock, another bit of eucalyptus, and a bit of ivy. So this is just, I'm just going to cut this one a little bit shorter. This is just a little bit of wild ivy, which I didn't have in the previous bunch. And the short bit that I cut off, I'm just going to catch that into the bunch as well. So there's literally no waste, and that'll help to make it nice and chunky. So this second bunch is going to rest quite close to the first bunch, but not overlapping too much. So we're going to rest it in there. And again, I'm going to use my left hand to support it, hold it in place. My right hand has the real wire, and around the ends of the stems there, I'm going to wrap the real wire 3 times. So there's our second time, there's our third time, and again, pull it real tight. Now we're going to do the same thing again. I'm taking up a little bit of the brown, a little bit of pittosporum, there's another bit of pittosporum, there's a little bit of dock, there's a little bit of eucalyptus. Can you see the way we're not being fussy? And here we have another little bit of ivy. And again, I'm going to place it onto the base. Excuse me. Using my left hand to support it, and my right hand is holding the real wire, and around we go, pulling it nice and tight 3 times, and again pull it really, really tight. So that's what it looks like so far, and just from the back there you can see how much bigger than the base the wreath is actually going to be. Now if you were short of your material, you could use an awful lot less in your bunches than I'm using. But again, when I was foraging this, I just made sure that I got plenty. So again, you can see when I'm making the bunches, there's no particular pattern. I'm just kind of grabbing them all together, and the only thing I'm being particular about is keeping all the ends nearly the same length. So I'm now going to rest that onto the base. on an angle, barely tipping our last space, and again move around 3 times and pull it really tight. And that's really the technique. You just continue on that all along. Now obviously you're watching there and you probably have foliage in your garden and you're wondering, like, would it do? Like, you can always in the comments, if you're watching this on Facebook or Instagram, in the comments place any questions there. We'll get a notification and I will come back to you with an answer. But eucalyptus is brilliant because it dries out really well. You know that way, as eucalyptus dries, it basically dies out. And I find the pittosporum is good as well as the ivy. Like, the ivy lasts for ages, you know that way. So to be honest, like, all the foliages that I'm using here today are ideal for making your door wreaths, and they're all good lasting foliage. Now if I find that there's a leaf at the end there and it's kind of getting in the way, you can see the way I just chucked it off. And again, resting it down onto the base, and around we go 3 times, pulling it really tight each time. And again, I'm just going to hold it up just so that you can see how it's coming together. And this is what it looks like at the back. So we're bringing it in close just so that you can see some detail. And I'm just making sure with this one that the brown Q press is on top, just so that I get that bit of colour. Where I have been adding it in, because it was kind of like placed maybe near the back, you couldn't see it so much. Now again, if you have a favourite foliage and you want more of that to show, the trick would be is to keep that kind of like placed on top. So again, I'm just like taking up selections of a bit of ivy and eucalyptus here, and I'm adding in a little bit of the dock, and I'm just adding another bit of pittosporum into the back, and I'm going to rest it in. I'm going to leave the dock out of this one because I just kind of feel it's too many brown pieces together. So we just add in our foliage, and again with our reel wire, we'll wrap it around the 3 times. Now if you find that your reel wire is not in the right spot for you each time, a little trick for you there is just pull that hand over there on an angle. So when you do go to wrap it around the next time, it's naturally over to the side. So again, like, you know what I mean, I have some of the ivy, a little bit of eucalyptus, a little bit of our black eucalyptus. And we're always getting asked questions like, what type of foliage should I grow in the garden, like for flower arranging yourself? And to be honest, any of the ones that I have just mentioned. And when you go to a garden centre, there's lots of different varieties of eucalyptus, lots of different varieties of pittosporum. Like here on the table, I have 3 different varieties. So the more varieties that you have, like the more space that you have in your garden, the more varieties of the different, you know, variations of eucalyptus and pittosporum I would recommend that you definitely grow. Now just moving you back out again while I continue on with our demonstration. So again, I'm just picking up different selections. Now I'm always being asked questions like, do we cover this as part of the professional programs? And I'll be honest and say no. So why would we? We always do these as the free courses. You know that way. We do often have workshops throughout the year where people can actually come and make up their own door wreath, you know. But like, I do have lots of these like free tutorials, whether you'll find them on our YouTube channel, Case Flower School. On our website, we always have a free tutorial on our website that you can just log in and you can watch. And then if you follow us on social media, whether it be Facebook, TikTok or Instagram, we're always doing live classes. And again, wreaths throughout the whole year, like not just autumnal wreaths, like wreaths like maybe for Christmas time, for weddings, for summer, for spring. We always have something a little bit different, you know that way. So make sure that you follow us on the social media pages and watch out for all our free classes. Again, if you have any questions and you're watching this on the social media, please put it in the comments. The people ask me, well, what kind of classes do you do at the school? So it's all commercial courses that we do, like courses that are geared towards people who maybe want to work at it, say business-wise, maybe make a few bob at it, okay? So the idea is with our courses, we teach you exactly where to buy the material. I know at the beginning I mentioned there, you could buy like the straw bases in the likes of Evergreen Silk Plants. But there is lots of other wholesalers around the country. Some of them are trade only, but we would have agreements with some of the wholesalers for our students, and they'd have discount codes, and we will set them up with accounts. So that would all be part of your training here at Case Flower School. And you're being taught like how to cost everything, and what we call the stem count, or the ingredients, or the recipe. How many flowers, how much materials, you know the way, do you use? So if one of our students was asked to do a 4 or 5 foot pedestal arrangement for a church, that they would know exactly how many lilies, how many gladdies, how many anthuriums, how many carnations, whatever the flower might be. They would know exactly how many stems that they would need to buy in. and then they would also know how much it is going to cost them to make, but then also what they're actually going to sell it at. So that's kind of the difference of commercial floristry, you know, that way, to the likes of hobby floristry. Now again, people would say, well, I've already done a hobby course, you know, that way, could I skip a module? And absolutely not, you know, that way. Hobby flower arranging is completely different to commercial flower arranging. And an example I often use to the students over the phone, like a lot of you, and obviously you're watching me now, so a lot of you can see, like, the blow dry on my hair isn't too bad, you know, that way. And I do that myself. But would I class myself a hairdresser? Absolutely not, you know, that way. So that's where I would obviously need professional training, you know, that way, if I wanted to be a hairdresser. So it's the same thing. I'm sure most of you that are watching, you also can blow dry your own hair, you know, that way, but it doesn't make you a hairdresser. Now again, just to kind of hold up, you can see I'm coming near the end, you know, that way, but I'll possibly get another 2 or 3 bunches. I definitely recommend don't skimp when you're making these. Like, the larger they are and the fuller they are, the nicer they are, right? So I'm going to get a second last. I say this will be our second last. Now again, maybe you're wondering there at home, like, how much greenery is it taking if you had to buy it, you know, that way. So if you were buying the greenery, there's roughly 1 whole bunch, 1 1/4 bunch of, if you were buying it wholesale. But obviously if you're going out to your garden, you know, that way, I would say about 100 sprigs of foliage is approximately what you need. So I'm on the second last one, and all along there I've been continuing, as you can see, to place them in on an angle. But when you come to the very last piece, which is just about now, can you see just in that gap there, there's a slight little change. So again, I'm just going to get the bunch made up in my hand here, and I'm kind of like down to the remnants on the table. Deirdre's just thrown me an extra few little pieces there, just to make sure. Again, some of them are a little bit long, just kind of trimming them off. And hopefully you've kind of seen all along, like, I haven't been fussy about what selections I'm using. I'm literally just taking the pieces up off the table, making bunches. Sometimes there's 6 pieces in a bunch, sometimes it was 4 or 5. You know, that way, depended whether they were skinny pieces or skimpy little pieces like that. Now when you come to your last piece, you place that one in straight. So instead of being on an angle, you place it in straight. So just into that area there, I'm going to place this bunch. So just wiggle it in. I often find, lift the very first bunch that I placed and just slide the stems of it kind of in underneath there, just to hide it. And when you're wrapping the real wire around this time, obviously I still have to pull it really tight, but I don't want to flatten down the other bouncy pieces that's there. So we call it like the wiggle the wire. So you're wiggling the wire in and out between there, pulling it nice and tight. And by the way, if you still thought, do you know what, I could do 1 more piece, it's not a big deal. Do you see what I'm just doing there to add in a piece? And then I'm wiggling the wire, and I'll just lift up that bit of ivy and just catch that around that one. And again, I think I'll just do another little bit of wiggling the wire in and around, just so that I'm not flattening material down. And again, I'm going to pull that nice and tight. And that's what it looks like at the back. So I'm now going to cut that wire off completely. And then with the little bit of wire that's left over, I'm making like a U shape, a hairpin bend, or a horseshoe bend we call it, and I'm sticking the spare piece of wire, the remaining piece of wire, up into the frame there, just so that it won't scratch anybody's door. And there is our foliage base, using selections of foliage from the garden. Now we're going to show you how to decorate it. Now we're ready to decorate the wreath and get it prepared for hanging on the door. What I'm going to use is some of the organza, but to be honest, like any sort of material that you would prefer, a piece of string would do the same job. Because it's kind of coming up to autumn time, Halloween time, I'm going for the orange, but again, the choice is yours, what colour you want to go for. So I'm going for a nice long piece. This is for hanging it on the door. I don't think I'm going to put a bow on this particular one, right? Because just like I'm always putting bows on them. And I have lots and lots of tutorials on making bows. And if you go to our website, flowerschoolisland.com, sorry, the other way around, kaysflowerschool.com, we changed our website recently, you will see tutorials under the blog on autumnal bows, or Halloween bows, or Christmas bows, or spring bows, so you can learn how to make lots and lots of bows. So here we have our long piece of organza. Pick a section where you'd like to hang it, like do you want a top, do you want a bottom, okay? So it's much of a muchness really. So I'm going to bring the organza in through the circle. I'm going to tuck it in underneath some of the foliage there, just to kind of like slightly hide it, camouflage it, and bring the 2 pieces, like roughly the same length, to see as each other. And then what I'm going to do is just tie a knot onto the actual base. So it means then if you're giving this as a present to somebody, it's really easy for them to carry. But then when they go home then, they use these 2 strings to tie it onto what I call their knockers or their door handle or wherever they choose to hang it. Now, because it's autumn, apples are on the tree, apples need to be picked. And recently we were out in Autumnal Orchard, which is an apple orchard here in Dublin. And if you watched us on Instagram, you would have seen that Deirdre actually picked all these apples, okay? So these are all apples. We didn't bother getting in and shining them up and cleaning them, but you can do that if you want to. So this is where you'll need wires. So 20 gauge wires, at least 12 inches, 30 centimetres in length. Now they're really easy to wire. You literally stick the wire through the apple, but just allow 2 centimetres or so to come out the opposite side, a short bit, okay? So then wrap the long piece of the apple around to meet the short piece and then just twist. So the short one and the long one twist together. Now yes, you're going to see the wire on one side of the apple, but when we're inserting it into the base, we'll make sure that that wire is lying down on the base. So again, we'll just get a second apple here. And again, if you want to, you can polish them up and so on. So you get your wire. You don't have to go through the middle of the apple. You can kind of go a third of the way through. It's really easy. Now you go through it really easy. So there you go. Let about 2 centimetres of the wire come through. Wrap the long one over to the short one. That's the trick, okay? Don't try and move that short one. And then all you do is you twist the long one and the short one together about 3 times just to secure them in place. So I'm going to use 6 apples on this wreath base. So how I'm going to do it is I'm going to do a group of apples, like say 2 apples maybe together. So bring your frame over the edge of the table. Just push everything there out of the way so you can see. So I'm going to bring the frame over the edge of the table and the wire is being inserted down through the foliage, okay? So that's what it's looking like there. The wire has come through the other side, so you can see underneath there, if you can see the tops of my fingers, that's where the wire has come through the other side. And what I'm doing to the wire is I'm making that horseshoe. Do you remember the U-bend I showed you when I finished the real wire? So I'm pushing the apple down firmly into the base, I'm making the U-bend, and I'm pushing the wire back up into the Q-press Leylandais base. So that's why you need a base if you want to add decorations. Now I'm going to keep the apples in 2s together. So I'm going to bring a second apple in here. So the same idea. The wire is just going to go down through the foliage and kind of feel underneath, and you'll feel the wire coming through. And again, I'm going to do a little U-bend and I'm going to stick that wire back up into the base. And there's our second apple. Now it's up to you. Do you want to leave the 2 together or would you like to put 3 together? I think I'll just go for the 2 for the moment. So I have some wired already just to save time. So I'm just picking another section and I'm doing the exact same thing. Now it's important when you're pushing the wire through, nearly push the apple down into the base as well. So here we have our second apple. So there, the wire has gone through. Now push the apple down into the base so most of the wire is coming through the other side and it's nice and firm. Make that U-bend and stick it back up into the base, you know, that way. And there is your second apple on. And now I'm going to put a group of 2 more apples, like as in a third group. Now there's no particular number. If you've done floristry before, you probably have been taught about the uneven numbers. But yet, like I've put 2 apples together, but yet I've made 3 groups. And if anybody is watching there and you'd prefer to keep your apples individually, you know, and divide them up, absolutely. I've done it before myself and it looked really, really well. So there is our half dozen apples onto our base. And again, you could just leave it like that. To substitute for the apples, you could use some mandarin oranges and they look really well. Another thing I'm going to add in is some pine cones. So the pine cones, again, in autumn they fall off the trees and it's something you can forage and you can collect. Again, using the long wire. With pine cones you have what we call the petals of the pine cone. So in between the petals, as low down as you possibly can, insert the wire and like the apple, leave about 2 centimetres sticking out. The longer wire wraps around the pine cone in between the petals until it comes around and it meets that short bit of wire sticking out. And very similar to the apple, 2 twists, maybe 3, and that's your pine cone wired. Again, have I got another one? No, they're all wired here already. So in between the apples, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in the wire of the pine cone down into the base, pushing it down, and the wire that came through the other side and making that little hairpin bend back up into the base and securing it. Now sometimes when you're sticking in the wire, like you lose it and you kind of say, where did it come now? But you know that way, just take it back out again and go in from another angle. Or the very odd time when you're sticking in the apple or the pine cones or any of the wires, is you hit a branch. I'm actually hitting one now, you know what I mean? So that's one of the branches of the Q press. Just take it out, just insert it slightly different on a different angle, and it'll work out for you. So again, I'm bending up the little hairpin bend underneath that, and I'm adding them in twos. So I'm putting in 3 groups of the pine cones, but I'm only putting 2 pine cones together. Now I've done this before, and I put 3 pine cones together, and it looks absolutely gorgeous. Again, I'm hitting a branch, so we just take it out and we go somewhere else. I've also done it before where I just put 2 groups instead of 3 groups. So when you're doing door wreaths, no rules apply. Like you discussed there, this one does need to be wired, so there's a chance for you to see it again. The world is your oyster, so you choose what way you want to decorate it. So again, just if you miss the pine cones, get your wire and insert it as low down on the petals as you possibly can. Leave a small little bit of wire sticking out. The long piece of wire wraps around the pine cone until it comes around and it meets the short piece that you left sticking out. And then with the tips of your fingers, 2 or 3 twists of your fingers, and that's your pine cone wired. So again, we'll just add this one in. So at this stage I have 6 pine cones and I have 6 apples, and that's what it looks like so far. And again, you can leave it like that, you don't have to add any more detail. Or if some of you are watching and you didn't get out to Baldonnel Orchard to pick the apples, go up to Tesco's, Lidl or Aldi and buy like the small apples that they would have for the children. The smell of these apples are absolutely gorgeous, by the way. Now these are dried out orange slices and lemon slices, and again the citrus smell of this is beautiful. So for anybody hanging this in their porchway, it really is going to be that kind of autumnal feel to it. Now because these are small, I'm going to place 2 together. But you can get them in a larger size, and individually is probably enough. So because I have them in 2s, I'm going to overlap them slightly, insert the wire in through the 2 slices at the same time till it comes out the opposite side. Again, we're leaving about 2 centimetres coming through. Bend the wires over till they meet, and again twist them with the tops of your fingers. It's the same technique all the time. So I've wired up 3 groups of the lemon slices. So where the apples or the cones is, I'm going to add in some lemon slices in this section here between the apples and the pine cones. And again, same idea, the wire that is coming through the opposite side underneath, I'm just shoving it up into the base. There's our slices there. And then between these apples and pine cones, I'm going to add in another 2 slices. And again, if you just have the 1 slice, that's absolutely fine. And sometimes when you insert them in, you can open them up like I've just done there. Do you see that they're kind of separately? And then in between these 2 over here, I'm going to add in the 3rd group of them. Again, if you just want to print the 1 group or the 2 groups, it's completely up to you. You know, that way, use your own imagination. And this is what it looks like so far now with our lemon slices, our fresh apples and our pine cones. Now the last thing I'm going to add, now again, like you don't have to add it, but this is an artificial berry that I also bought up in Evergreen Silk Plants, okay? And there's 5 little sprigs on it, and it comes in other colours, so like the Christmas time he has it in red. And I'm just going to break them up, and I'm going to use 3 of them, so I'm just going to separate them. So there I have just the 3 berries, and I just think the colour is going to complement the apples and also the rusty browns that I added in. We don't even need that artificial leaf. So in the space between the cones and the apples, where I didn't add the lemon slices, that's where I'm going to add the little bit of berry. Now when you're watching this at home, do you know, that way you might be saying to yourself, do you know, I prefer if that was all berries. And somebody else would be saying, I preferred it with just the apples but maybe more apples. And somebody else is probably saying that they would have kept it all natural with just the pine cones. And I bet there's somebody saying there, she ruined it when she put the decorations on. She should have just left it all foliage. So I hope you kind of understand that there's not a rule and there's not a guideline. I'm just kind of giving you different ideas how you can actually decorate it. But that's what it looks like now, where our 3 lots of berries through it. Now I definitely think at this stage we have plenty in that autumnal door wreath. So I hope you enjoyed that tutorial, and remember, follow us on Instagram, follow us on Facebook every Wednesday at 12 o'clock. We always have live classes, and keep an eye on the website. There's always a free feature video on our website each month.